Have you ever wondered how hard it is to make a functioning AAA game? Or maybe you got the idea to create a video game from scratch. I wanted to answer that question by attempting to remake my childhood favorite game, Call of Duty Zombies, with minimal dev experience. I'm a senior electrical and computer engineer, but I've never actually made a game. I just wanted to know if an engineering major can make a game from scratch. Here's how it went. I basically had to solve a series of problems to get this game working the way I wanted it to. The problems got harder and harder as I progressed through them, some way harder than others, like ray tracing, nav mesh, colliders, C# coding.
Okay, we are cooked.
I was walking into the challenge with minimal preparation. The only time I touched Unity was to make the FIFA game, and that was more of an intro to Unity type game. I also needed to catch the train the next day, so I was only giving myself 24 hours to make this game. Then I realized how hard this was going to be when I actually tried coding the movement. I made a capsule and a floor and started by trying to code some C# scripts for the inputs and make the player move with WASD and a space bar to jump. We got the player only moving forwards and backwards across the Z axis, and the jump, yeah. I Google searched a couple of different tutorials and found out about Unity's input system. This input system is actually really cool because it is used to make different input maps. Walking, driving, flying, so we could basically make GTA later. With all the inputs in their correct spots now, we needed also a look script where we basically edit the sensitivity of the mouse to look left, right, up, and down. A lot of the math had to be fixed, like my jumping felt like you were playing the map Moon. The sensitivity was messed up for a lot of the time of me trying to test this game. But if you can move around in the map and look at some goofy odd trees I made for Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, it doesn't really matter. This isn't really actually a game. If you've ever played Call of Duty Zombies before, you know there's a lot of interactions within the game. I really thought these interactions that happen in a split second were really easy to code. But after watching some tutorials and reading up on some documentation, I realized it wasn't as easy as I thought. There are 6 different parts to an interaction. We need to press a key and look at an interactable object, then produce a raycast invisible laser from the player's eyes to the object. Then when the raycast hits the interactable object, we have to ensure that it's interactable, and it pulls up a message basically allowing the player to know that this is an interactable object. The game then waits for the player to hit the button that it is coded to. Then it calls base interact, and then it calls interact within base interact because it's an abstract class. Finally, the interaction script, in this case it was the keypad to the door, called and plays an animation. So guys, in English terms, when I go close to an object, the words would pop up on the screen. The object would wait for me to hit the E key, and then the event would call that script. We also need to subtract this purchase from our points. I didn't do this until later as I didn't add the point system until the end. Player health. We also needed a way to know when the zombies are actually hitting the player. I created a new script for the player and added a health amount and a health variable. Then I placed a random cube in the game and basically allowed it to be an interactable. If the player interacted with it, it would basically hurt the player. This is just the way that I tested if the health was working. And trust me, I should not have spent 4 to 5 hours figuring out how health works. I also watched a tutorial to add a damage overlay, so that way I can actually red screen. Basically, I made this when the player gets hit, the red screen overlay pops up and then quickly fades out, unless the player is below 30 health and the red screen stays on, almost like the actual Call of Duty game. I also needed to add a health regeneration system where after 3 seconds, your health gradually will build back up from when you were hurt. But guys, guys, this didn't matter at all if we didn't even have any zombies in the game. This was the most important part, but definitely the hardest. I made a default mesh out of cubes and just wanted to make it so one zombie could just run around the map. I just made the zombie look for the object with the player tag. I also needed to add a nav mesh surface, basically saying to the zombies, yeah, you can walk in this area. However, once I did this, the zombies could not get through the door after I opened it. I also made it so the zombie doesn't instantly hurt the player, but rather has to be touching the player for 0.6 seconds to actually attack. Almost like the actual game, when the zombies swing their arms at you, it's not instant that you get hit. We had 3 states for the zombies: alive, dead, and despawned. We had alive when he was running after the player, dead after the zombie's health reached 0, and despawned, they die, they despawn, so it clears out the space and we don't crash the game. Trust me when I say I tried to get an animation of the zombie falling over, but the problem was I kept locking the zombie in position. I spent probably an entire night just trying to figure out this whole animation system thing and why it was not working, and little did I know I hit the record button and it was freezing in position. But we really needed to make this feel like actual zombies, so we had to add waves and rounds. Each round spawns a fixed number of zombies. The first round spawns 5 and then it adds 3 upon every single round after that, making the zombies faster and stronger as the rounds go on. I also added 4 different spawn points across the map. That way they're not spawning on top of each other or on top of the player. After all the zombies were dead in the round, we basically would wait a couple of seconds and start the next round. However, obviously we needed some way to kill the zombies. I made a quick 3D mesh that uses ray casting from how we made the interactions method. This means at first we didn't use bullets flying. The gun basically shoots a invisible line at the zombie and sees if this ray cast hits the zombie. If it does, it calls the take damage function on the zombie. So if the zombie was shot 5 times, the zombie would die. And we needed that final satisfying movement when you shoot the zombies in the game. For the UI, we needed to add 2 main things: points and a round number. Since we already had the damage overlay, I figured out a lot of this stuff was pretty easy. I didn't even need to read documentation, or so I thought. I already had the round printing out in the debug log, so I just basically slapped that onto the actual UI. Then I needed to edit 3 functions within the player for the points: when the player shoots a zombie, when the player kills a zombie, and when the player interacts with something. First, they had to check if the player could actually afford whatever they were trying to purchase, and then it had to take away the money from the player and purchase it. Finally, I touched up everything and tied it all together, and there we go. I made Temu Call of Duty Zombies. Before the train, too. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.